Hello, everyone. I am not Barton Seaver. I know you were tuned in today expecting a live event with Chef Barton Seaver. For those of you who have been watching Chef Barton the last few weeks, you know that he and his wife, Carrie, are expecting a new family member, and that time has come. So I am filling in today for Chef Barton to help get this live event off the ground. We did have an inkling knowing that this might have happened, so we did actually pre-record some of the cooking sessions that Barton wanted to show today. So my name is Chef Ken Rubin. I'm the Chief Culinary Officer here at Rouxbe. I will be filling in for Chef Barton today, presenting some of the videos that we pre-recorded with him, and also going through some of the questions that you all have already put here in the queue. Rest assured, we will absolutely have Barton back, maybe not next week, but the week after. And we do have his commitment to answer those questions in any questions that we didn't get to in a live event later on. So do please keep your questions coming, whether I get to them today or whether Chef Barton gets to them at a later date. But just wanted to, again, thank Barton for all the work that he's done with us so far, and looking forward to his contributions, of course, now that he has a new family member joining us. So we're very excited for him and his family. Just really thrilled to be able to share that news with everyone. So we're going to go ahead here now and start the videos of some of the things that we planned ahead on and pre-recorded, knowing that this might have happened. And in between those videos, I'll come back to answer some questions, provide some context, and we'll wrap up after a few of those segments. So let's go ahead and queue up those videos, Patrick. And we can enjoy Barton doing some cooking in his backyard here for just a bit.
Hey everyone, welcome back for those of you who have joined us before, or welcome if you're new. My name is Barton Seaver. I am a chef, author, and passionate and proud resident of the ragged, delicious coast of Maine. I live here with my lovely ladyfish wife and son, the kid Squid. And hey, I'm proud and pleased to have partnered with Rouxbe on their seafood literacy course. Please check that out. But today, we're not talking seafood, we're talking veggies. So first off, I want to say thank you to Patrick Britton, who is behind the scenes at Rouxbe running this course for us, as well as my business partner, Katie, who is behind the camera today. She might chime in. And so one last thing before we get started is that my neighbor Lori is mowing her lawn, and well, we might need to take a pause and go ask her to, we'll feed her lunch if she'll take a half-hour break or so. So we've got a number of dishes for you today. Check out just under the viewing window there. There's a download for some of the recipes that we're featuring today. And hey, grilling. Grilling is the very best form of cooking there is. It's also the most complicated in that, well, you have a live fire. It's not just turning on the grill, just turning on the gas. It's it's live, it's living. It's dependent upon the ecosystem with which you're in which you are. That goes for gas grilling as well as charcoal, but I am a charcoal fanatic, or actually wood grilling fanatic, because I like that sexy, seductive, rustic flavor that just smells like romance on your food, just topped a little bit of passion and intrigue, right? Those are good ingredients. Hey, it all comes from this. The other reason why I really love grilling is that it gets you outside. It forces you out of your normal routine and into something new. It forces us to slow down a little bit. It also forces us to organize when we're cooking. I mean, we're not in our kitchen. We don't just have that at the ready to grab. So we have to be mindful of getting ourselves set up and ready. And with that, I am set up and ready over here with a fire in my small Weber grill. Now, I'm a big fan of the small Weber grill because, it's a small area. And small areas need less heat, less fire, in order to get the heat effective. If you have a really big grill, you have to have a really big fire in order to get the heat that you need. And to me, that's just more variables to control. I can do just about anything on this that you can do in any other size grill. You just need to know how to strategize for that. So the first strategy that I use is, when you're starting your fire, I use a charcoal chimney. which is just key because it works. I never use any lighter fluid. I just use newspaper, which is perfect, and I just don't like that chemical smell. So the charcoal I use, charcoal briquettes, I like that better than the chunk charcoal. I feel like I get more control over it. It burns a little less hot. And ultimately, when I'm grilling, I don't want high heat. I don't want to kill the food again. What I'm trying to do is add flavor and cook it through. So I don't want searing, vicious, vigorous, violent heat. What you want to do, though, is what I have here. If you'll zoom in, Katie. And I've got a couple things going already, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I have all of my coals over to one side of the grill. And the reason for this is that, I think that's just about done while we're talking. The reason for that is, well, you know, when you cook on a stove, you've got this sauce on a low heat, you've got the rice on medium, you've got your saute on high heat, right? It's the fact that you have access to so many different types of heat, different levels of heat, that makes cooking really effective and convenient. So on a grill, give yourself that same convenience by putting all of your coals to one side in what's called indirect heat. What you do is you have a raging hot side for searing, you have a middle side for sort of cooking through anything you're not trying to really char, and then you've got a side over here which is lower heat. And so you can do slow cooked things like the gazpacho that I'm going to put on here in a minute. But what this gives you is some variables to work with, and that's a good thing. So I'm going to close down my airflow at the bottom here, so I have my flame last a little bit longer. So we're going to be doing, I think, 5 dishes. The first, well, and I'm not sure exactly which order I'm going to do them in, but the dishes we've got is a smoky gazpacho, which is very similar to the traditional gazpacho, except I cook a few of the ingredients really smoky, and it just gives it such a nice underlying flavor. We're going to be doing a charred snap pea salad with mint and red onion. We are doing a grilled okra, which is one of my very favorite vegetables and my 3.5-year-old son's very favorite food. We're going to be doing that with a charred onion dip. We're going to be doing talking about alternative burgers, so like veggie burgers. I've got here actually a tuna burger. And then I'm going to be doing a roasted eggplant dip. Now, grilling tends to be, well, very just meaty, right? It's all about the meat, the center of the plate. Actually, to me, grilling is all about the season. It's all about the fresh produce. And you know what? The burger? Well, it's a burger. I can go get a burger anywhere, right? I can get a good burger anywhere. I can make a great burger here too, but what makes it really fun is the ability to, well, cook from the farmer's market. It's really the vegetables that are the star of the show at my house. Always, but especially on the grill, and that's what we're focusing on today. So, KK, if you wouldn't mind coming back on over here. What I've gotten here is a different means of cooking. Not above the heat, in the heat. You've got all these wonderful, wonderful embers and coals down there. They provide direct heat, and for vegetables like onions, I mean, can you see how it's just bubbling and sexy and delicious? Well, it provides direct heat. You get a very quick char on things like roasted red peppers, so that you get just the skin off, but you still have some of that raw flavor to it. You have onions, which I roast whole in their skins. Now, you want to roast things in embers only that you are going to be able to peel off that charred layer. One of my favorite dishes that I do is a ember roasted butternut squash hummus, which is
mine too.
Just fabulous. So anything, you don't want to eat that char, but it imbues all of that flavor. So the other thing that I've got down here is a couple onions and an eggplant as well. And those of you who've joined us in weeks past, you saw me do this in the first week of our grilling sessions. But look at that. Man, the skin just peels right off, right? But man, it's steamed in its own juices and kind of smoked too, and just, yeah, it's just a good thing. So, yeah, you don't want to eat that char, actually. It's not very good. So, I've got those off of the grill, or out of the grill, and those are going to be for a couple of different dishes here. So, before I put the grill grate on, I just wanted to show you those. Now I've got a couple of chunks of wood in there as well. So I start with charcoal, but then I just add some wood. You want to add small pieces that are going to ignite quickly, burn down to coals quickly, but also not cause a huge fire. Because when you're grilling, you don't want to cook on flame. You want to cook on coals, on embers. The flame is just going to burn your food. You see this smoke right here? See how it's black? Ain't very good, right? That's not going to taste very good. It's a critic, it's bitter, and well, smoke has many stages to it, but this first stage isn't so tasty. After you get through that like light blue smoke, it gets black, and you want to get past that. So I'm going to add a few of those in there, and then I'm going to put the grill grate on. So I'm going to demonstrate these dishes. Now, I'm not coming to you live this week because, well, the vagaries of weather and timing and the 3.5-year-old's naps and stuff like that. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to pull this off. Oh yes, by the way, I don't have internet out here really, so I'm not coming to you live, but I'm going to be back with you live for some questions. Is that true, KK? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm having a child. We're having our second child in 3 weeks. So I'm not really that focused. I'm also really just kind of unaware of the future right now. So playing it by ear a little bit. So yes, I will be back with you live later today in this broadcast event to take questions with you, to talk your comments, any questions you've got, any experiences that you have. I'd love to hear from you. Which ways you love to grill, some of maybe your favorite dishes out there, favorite side dishes, just great memories. But it doesn't have to be about grilling. Any question you want, happy to answer for you. So the dish that I want to go to first here is another slow preparation. Now, one of the things that I try and do when I light up a grill is cook dishes that I'm going to eat over the course of a couple of days. Because yeah, it takes work to get this thing going. It takes work to get it right? So do yourself the favor and utilize it to its full extent. So this smoky gazpacho that I'm going to make, no, I'm not going to make it for today. I'm actually just going to roast the tomatoes, the onions already roasted, the peppers already roasted. I'm going to puree it with a cucumber and a little bit of sherry vinegar and olive oil. And I'm just going to put it in the fridge and I'm going to eat it over the next couple of days. And it's delicious. So I'm not going to fully prepare this for you, but I'll show you that just how I use that indirect heat. Now, all I'm trying to do here is desiccate this a little bit, cook out a little bit of the moisture, but really it's about flavoring. So I'm going to put them cut side down, because the cut side, well, that's the one that's going to absorb the flavor, not the skin. Now that flame is just a little bit high, but I'm going to go with it anyway. You see, I'm putting them as far away from the flame as I can, and those are just going to sit there. And then when they're ready, you just pull them off, and because you're doing this for another day, you're not in any rush to execute the dish immediately. So as those tomatoes are going, as I said, I've got the red pepper here. Show you how to peel that when it cools down. I've got 1 onion for that. And then I've got 2 dishes that we're going to cook directly over the highest heat. And that's going to be the snap pea salad as well as the grilled okra. So let's start with the okra. I'm going to serve it with a really wonderful sauce that I like to make, which is a charred onion dip. Now, the recipe that I provided for you, the other thing I like about grilling, you can just do that. You got some trash, throw it right back on the grill, throw it on the ground. I got so many critters here on the farm that somebody will eat it, right? Here comes Lori with her lawnmower. Hey. We live amongst neighbors and we love our neighbors, right? Isn't that what we are called to do? And butterflies too. So a little bit of char in this dish is fine. You don't want to destroy you don't want to get rid of all of your onion just to get rid of a few little chunks of char there. But as I was saying, the recipe that I provided for you for this does this charred onion dip that is on the stovetop, where you basically just put onions in a dry saute pan or just a tiny little bit of oil, and you let them burn. You just let them burn, folks. So something I said a couple of weeks ago in the demos, Burn is a great flavor if it is paired well. It's bitter, it's acidic, not like the smoke, but it's heady and it's different and it's got such a presence to it, especially when it's paired with something sweet and something fatty. Well, it really blooms and it becomes just a beautiful presence in the dish. So I'm just gonna chop this up, and I figured I would just, well, cook it on the grill because, as I said, I got the grill going. But burning these in like a cast iron pan, a dry cast iron pan on the stove, works equally well. Now, this dip is really good with potato chips. It's really good with grilled okra. It's really good with broccoli. It's really good with your pinky finger, your middle finger, your index finger, your thumb, your palm. You just kind of want to rub it on your face because it's really tasty. Katie's giving me weird looks because I'm getting weird. So, onion chopped up. That's just a rough chop. You could put this in a little food processor like a Ninja, something like that, to get it really pureed, but I like that texture. Quite honestly, I probably should have chopped that a little more than I did. So that's just sour cream there. I've also got some smoked paprika, smoked sweet paprika. I don't like any paprika other than sweet. I just think it has a spice to it that gets you back here, like A1 sauce, it gets you here. But the sweet stuff is beautiful. It's elegant and ebullient in its flavor, subtle in its smoke. And though I've smoked the onions here, and the recipe that I shared with you calls for smoked paprika because I cooked it on the stovetop. So mix that in, and then what was the other part of that? Just chives. So you're basically kind of making an onion dip from the store, like the Hell of a Good brand or whatever it's called, except this is infinitely better. So just chopped fresh chives. You could put scallions in there. Any herb, tarragon works really well, parsley works well, but just giving it that little bit of freshness really works well. So, hey, what's your favorite herb? Do you like to grill like with rosemary or something like that? Hard herbs tend to be really good on the grill. Thyme, rosemary, I consider oregano a hard herb as opposed to soft herbs like parsley, cilantro, things like that. So here is the smoked onion dip. Put some salt in there as well. My salt is so clumpy right now.
It's wet salt season.
I live right on the coast. I mean, the Atlantic Ocean is 30 yards that way. So it's always a little clumpy, but especially the past couple of days, we've had so much rain. So with the okra, I've just skewered it. You don't have to do that, but guess what? I could either move 6 pieces of okra, or I could move 1 skewer. I'll choose the 1 skewer. Now, okra is, well, it's one of those polarizing ingredients. Some people just don't like it very much, but well, I think it's absolutely delicious, and grilling it is a really fun way to do it and give it something a little bit new, and it chars. And you need to use young okra that don't have the stringiness to them. So I'm just gonna olive oil, and I use olive oil for everything I cook pretty much. As long as it's gonna end up as part of the dish, as it is here, let's go ahead and use the olive oil. Now I put them on the wood skewers. I don't soak wood skewers. I just, especially if I'm going to, really, you want to cook something quick enough that the wood is not going to burn. So, or if it does, it's not going to burn through in the middle section that's holding the food together. So that's okay. So we're just going to put those on there. Now again, this is really great with broccoli. It's great with spring onions, with leeks. It's great with carrots even that have been simmered in a little bit of salted water with vinegar. Parsnips. Hey, delicious stuff, folks. All right.
You want to take a few questions while we let those cook through for a minute?
No, if you don't mind. I think we're just going to keep going. I'm going to just show how to peel the, that's a great suggestion, KK, but I appreciate it. I'm just going to show how to peel the pepper. All you do is, as soon as it's cool enough to handle, just flake it right off. And again, you don't want to worry about You don't want to worry about you don't want to worry about any little bits of that remaining char on there too much. You want to get it all off, but definitely do not wash this. Washing it is just going to wash away all of your flavor, and you know, you worked hard to get it there on the grill. And then you just pull out the seed pack there. That just is discarded. And there you go, there's your roasted pepper. And so your ingredients for your gazpacho then become your roasted pepper, your roasted tomatoes, which are, yeah, they're smoky, they're sweet. That acid has just been heightened just a little bit. They've gotten just a little bit of char to them. They're hot, ow. Put that in there. Last thing you do is just peel up this onion as well. Throw that in there. Cucumber. I only peel, I like to leave a little bit of the peel of the cucumber on. And the reason for that is, well, it tastes really good. It's the most cucumbery flavor of the part of the cucumber, right? So I'll discard just a little bit of that. And then the final ingredients are olive oil, salt, and sherry vinegar, which to me is the king of all vinegars. It just has the most bright, brilliant, ebullient flavor to it. The acidity is so punchy that it really just works perfectly well with things. You don't want to eat it. You don't use very much of it, but it delivers huge flavor, huge acidity in just a little bit. So with that, now let's take some questions. I'll be with you live now for a minute, and then we'll be right back to the grill.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that Barton had pre-recorded that video in anticipation for the arrival of his new family member. It looks like he came a little bit earlier than he expected, which is a lot of fun, obviously, for him and his family. I'm going to go ahead and just answer a few of the questions that have been posed already. And again, leaving some of these for Barton to answer in the future. So I won't get to all the questions, but I'll selectively get to some of these questions, and then we'll actually go back to Barton's pre-recorded video, continue watching some of those dishes, and have another opportunity to answer some more questions. But the first question I just want to address here came in from Mike. Mike says, I don't have an outside grill as I live in an apartment. I have a cast iron grill that I use on the stove top. What are the best ways to keep food from sticking on the grill without using oils? So, Mike, I think, when you're using kind of a stove top grill pan is what we would refer to that as. It's a much different technique than if you had a live fire. Barton spent some time talking about the fire and the characteristics of the fire, and the very, very hot part and the medium part and the cooler part. And of course, the impact of smoke and char and all those other characteristics that you get from a proper grill versus a pan that has, those little grates or those little raised elements that make it, appear as if it were grilled. When it comes to kind of non-stick sorts of things within that context, my recommendation would be, in terms of cast iron, number one, just make sure that cast iron is really well seasoned, right? So you want to make sure that you have spent the time to season that pan really, really well. In other words, going through the process of giving it a very small amount of oil, rubbing it into the surface of the pan, cooking that oil into the surface of the pan, typically by baking it in an oven for multiple hours and letting it cool even overnight, and doing that multiple times. And also treating that pan really well. You're not going to add aggressive soapy water. You're not going to simmer things in that pan. You're not going to add lots of detergents and soaps. You're going to basically treat that pan as delicately as you can. If it's well seasoned with oil and all those other things, at that point, it's not like you're adding oil to your food. So I think as long as you have a really well seasoned pan that'll have a natural non-stick function as a utility by way of having that oil, but it's not really imparting oil into your food. So without any added oil, that would be my suggestion for working with a grill pan. I would say part of it too, in terms of things sticking, Mike, would be cutting those vegetables that you're cooking in the right proportion, thin enough essentially, so that you get a a fair amount of cooking time to cook through, but they're not sitting there so long where they have a chance to really adhere as much to that pan. So hopefully that works for you, Mike. Really, I would say the key in that situation that you're describing is in seasoning the pan and using that oil as a utility versus as an added ingredient. Next question here is coming from Hilda. She says to Barton, by the way, since you introduced us all to shishito peppers, I've been buying them by 2s and 3s from our local farm truck. Yum and thanks. Yeah, shishito peppers are amazing. They're one of these pepper varieties that a lot of people have, I think, been exposed to as an item on menus in the last number of years, but they are very prolific. They grow extremely well, and there are just so many delicious applications for grilling, blistering, doing quick cooking methods with those shishitos. I find that the flavor is just phenomenal. You get delicious sweet tones and just a lot of depth of flavor coming from them. But that 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 of those peppers can be quite spicy. Have a lot of heat to it, a little bit of a kick. That picante sort of feeling comes through in some of those peppers and is very mild in others. So that's one of the fun things about shishitos. Next question here, I'm going to address about grilling potatoes on the grill. This is a really important question. Barton did a masterful job of explaining when you're preparing things for the grill that certain things can go on as is, right? Like with the skin on, an onion with the skin on, an eggplant with the skin on. If you're looking for that, in the embers sort of char and that really intense smoke and fire you get. Other things like a potato or a carrot or other starchy root vegetables, parsnips, these sorts of things. If you want to put those on the grill, my suggestion would be to par cook those items first. So if you want to do some grilled baby red potatoes, let's say, delicious summertime grilled dish, I would recommend par cooking those potatoes in salted water until they're about 2/3 of the way done or 3/4 of the way done. You don't want them completely soft. You want them to be intact, still very toothsome, but you want them to have already completed the majority of their cooking process. Just in that moist heat method, submersion cooking, simmering method. Now, once you do that, you can slice those potatoes in half so you get more surface area. Those can be just directly put on the grill. If you want to have a little bit of oil and seasoning, that's going to help with flavor and with non-stick on the surface there. But really the technique is that you can grill them whole if they're small enough, or slice them in half or into wedges. And those just go straight on the grill after they've been par cooked. You will notice that something like a potato is going to have a lot of starches right at the surface. So a raw potato versus a par cooked potato are going to exhibit much different properties in terms of how quickly they color or brown or create exterior texture and these sorts of things. But 100% great way to prepare things on the grill. I think sometimes when people think about veggies on the grill, there's a little bit of a mind jag where they get caught up in, oh, I can only put corn on the cob on the grill, or sliced vegetables, or it has to be mushrooms on a skewer sort of a scenario. I would say all bets are off. You want to do the butternut squash in the grill, you want to do these other things, that's going to be super exciting in creating a lot of dynamic flavor and just a whole array of possibilities in terms of what you're grilling. Next question here, I'm going to just take from Natasha. Natasha's asking about bay leaves. I'm going to just recall quickly a recent live event with Chef Barton where he was cooking some shellfish, and I think it was a mussel dish, if I'm not mistaken, where Barton was talking about bay leaves. And I got a good chuckle out of it because he buys, number one, very large containers of bay leaves, which I also do, considering the price differential and all those other things. But he was very aggressive in his use of bay leaves in this particular dish. He added 4, 5, 6 bay leaves, maybe even more than that in a dish. And I was a bit shocked because I haven't seen people use that many bay leaves in the past. But I think, in my perspective, my opinion, bay leaves can be used in a variety of ways. People oftentimes think about bay in this kind of low, slow. I use it in a sauce or a stock or in a soup, sort of a context. And certainly, the more you cook the bay in that moist environment, the kind of more cohesive the bay will become with the larger dish. The flavors have time to develop and blend and kind of become evident throughout. In faster cooking scenarios, like what Barton was showing in particular with the shellfish, you can be more aggressive with the amount of bay that you're using because you don't have that time component. You don't have that time horizon to develop the flavors. So bay, to me, is very unique. Many of us probably have bay sitting in our pantry from 20 years ago. And that's a shame because that bay is not going to taste like a whole lot. It might actually taste bad. It might have a musty or a kind of a wet cardboard or like a closet type of a flavor to it. And that's not going to taste good in your food. So if your bay leaf has been sitting there for a long time, if you got it for a wedding gift and you're still having it occupy a space in your shelf, it's time to buy some new bay leaves. I would say that when you think about the flavor of bay, it's a very subtle, nuanced sort of flavor that I think lends itself particularly to other foods where you're looking either for some balance or you're looking for just a little bit of background flavor to give some interest. Bay itself, I would say, when you're thinking about the flavor characteristics or the flavor profile of bay, it is from the laurel tree. It has aromatics similar to kind of a very mild, like a eucalyptus sort of opening sort of sensation, let's say. It also just has, I think, some really interesting vegetal type characteristics, given that it is a leaf, which add just some dynamics to a dish. So if you were to make something very, very simple, like white rice or simple boiled potatoes, and you were to include a few bay leaves and salt seasoning in one batch and then exclude it in another and were to taste it side by side, I think you'd be really surprised, the nuance, the difference. Without the bay leaf, it just might taste a little bit flat, a little bit less round, and just have a little bit less of a dynamic interest to it. So it's not a potent or bold seasoning. It's not something that's going to add a big punch like other things will. But certainly, I think when you're developing your palate, you're learning how to taste, understanding nuance, subtleties in food, bay is going to be a really interesting and important part of that. Now, we typically talk about bay being used in a whole leaf form, where you then remove that leaf because you can't chew that. It's not something you want to eat. It's one of the few things that doesn't really even break down much when you're simmering it for long periods of time. But there are applications where bay leaf is used in a ground up form. And in that scenario, in that context, obviously you're going to have a different flavor component than just the infusion with the bay leaves. So hopefully that helps there. Next question coming in. I'm going to answer a question from Leslie. She says, is it possible to grill vegetables without adding oil? And if so, how do you have any tips? So that's a question from Leslie. Leslie, I'll say that 100% you can grill vegetables without oil. Again, going back to the video that Barton showed, we have a few different techniques. One is sort of directly in the fire, on top of the fire. All those things, while oil adds flavor and adds some protection against sticking, oil won't be required. So I would say some of the starchier vegetables, you might get some sticking, but things like the okra and the tomatoes and the onions, no oil needed. Just want to make sure you're monitoring your heat and doing a good enough job of moving those around so they don't get stuck in one place. I'm going to go ahead now and actually ask Patrick, our producer, to go back to Barton in his beautiful backyard and get back to some cooking, and then we'll have another chance to answer some questions on behalf of Barton here in just a minute.
So the okra is now done. I've cleaned up our board a little bit as well. And well, you can see some of them a little more charred than others, and that's a wonderful thing to me. So there you go. You've got your onion dip. And that, folks, is something really fun, very different, new, but a really fun way to eat or introduce people to a vegetable they might not know or might not like. But again, any tender vegetable that you've got will work well with that. So next thing I'm going to be cooking, again, right over the hottest part of the grill, is going to be the pea salad. So just a little bit of olive oil, a good bit of salt, and I use kosher salt here. I'm using a good bit of it. And again, I'm using, instead of using the skewers, I'm using a grill grate because, well, I'm looking to feed you, right? Not the fire. So just do yourself a favor and, well, use tools that make everything a lot easier. So the other flavors in this, well, the classic combination of peas and mint, then also red onion, which is one of my very favorite ingredients, especially when it's charred a little bit, whether on the stovetop or on the grill. Now I'm not going to do that here because the peas absorb a lot of that smokiness, so we don't really need much more. But as those cook, and they'll char just a little bit, you know, don't use your knife to stir things. It's not good. Oh, and by the way, when I was using my pinky finger and all my fingers to eat the charred onion dip there, Katie was suggesting that maybe I just use a spoon, which is far more sanitary and polite. And, well, thanks for that suggestion, KK. Appreciate it. So we're still cooking these over here. Now I'm going to slice these as thin as possible. I like to take out that center piece a little bit because it's hard to get a good slice on that. And I like a good bit of red onion here. It's not just a garnish. It really is part of it. It really is a you know, significant part of the salad. And, so there you go. And the dressing for this, I use white balsamic. And those of you who have never heard of white balsamic, it is, well, it's really delicious. It's very sweet. It's not very acidic, similar to regular balsamic, but it's got this wonderful aroma to it. It's the must of uncooked, like balsamic is a cooked must. This is an uncooked must, meaning the juice of grapes that's then fermented. So it's got this wonderful, lively, bright, very floral, very fruity aromas to it, which match well with the bitterness and sort of the char, as I was talking about earlier. And it's as simple as olive oil and balsamic. And yeah, that's it. Salt is already on the peas. We got some fresh mint from the garden here. Now there's several types of mint, and we can talk about this a little bit later, but to me, classic mint is really just the way to go. And mint, for any of you who have mint in your garden, you'll know this, that mint informs you, the cook, on how to use it, which is put it in everything, because that is the only way to control it in the garden. Iced tea, lemonade, and your vodka tonics, and your pea salads, etc. So that's about it. I just want a little bit of char on some of them. They're all going to be hot through, even if some of them aren't charred. And then you've already got a bowl in your hand, pretty much, so just toss that through. And because this is such a rustic dish, don't worry about dressing it perfectly. So I just shake that all together, pour it over top. And then just the rough cut mint. And there you go. beautiful salad. Super fresh, easy, and fun. A little bit different way to sort of support whatever your main dish is off the grill. So with that, I'm gonna clean up a little bit more. I'll take a question from you and I'll be right back.
Awesome. Well, that was fun to see that that pea dish come together. You know, one of the things that struck me watching Barton cook, and it's interesting for me to sit and provide some commentary and answer questions, is just the attention he's paying to the grill, but also the comfort level, seeing that he has some variations, some variability, some distinct, things on the grill that are, more charred than others, and some are very light and some are darker. And I just wanted to point that out because within the world of cooking and learning to cook, there's a attention to consistency that we sometimes make. And I just want to make an argument against consistency and for some irregularity, because that's what adds interest to your food. If every bite tastes exactly the same and looks exactly the same, you lose something. You lose part of the art. You lose part of the essence of cooking in the season. So when I look at Barton's technique and how there's some variability, I very much appreciate that. As a chef and as a person who enjoys eating food, that's what makes food dynamic and interesting and different every time. If it were always the same and always consistent, then you might as well just have a robot cook it for you, because if that's the way you want it. But for me, it's just more exciting and more interesting, more dynamic to show the variation, especially what a live fire can do. So I just wanted to point that out as just an observation before we move on to just a handful of questions here. The questions coming in are beginning to be congratulatory for Barton and his family, which is great. They have a lot to be celebrating right now. One question here I just wanted to take from Brenda. Brenda says, "Hi, Chef. Is there a tip you can share on seasoning vegetables on the grill, or is it better to season them after taking them off? Good seasoning, ? So Brenda, I think when it comes to seasoning things for the grill, there's really three different approaches that people take. One would be seasoning before it goes on the grill. And basically that means if you've got vegetables, maybe you're adding salt and pepper or some other herbs and spices. A lot of those are dependent on how long you're cooking and how much heat you're applying and those sorts of things. Sometimes herbs and spices can become a little bit bitter if they're added too early. I've also seen a lot of application for people who just put the veggies on and then kind of season while it's cooking, right? So the veggies are on and they're just adding a little bit of salt or adding some herbs, just kind of straight over the grill as it's cooking, a little bit more impromptu, more informal style. And of course, seasoning, adding the flavor, building flavor after the fact is another great thing. So taking your veggies off the grill, taking them out of the embers, and then peeling, chopping, adding your salt, your vinegar, your herbs, your crushed garlic, whatever it might be. And there's a lot to be said for that kind of post-cooking flavor development piece. I would say ideally, when you're thinking about grilling, there's a time and place for all those things. It's not like there's one rule that would trump the others. So a lot of it just, again, has to do with being mindful not to apply too much heat too quickly, and then you're burning paprika, you're burning the tarragon that you sprinkled on something, and that's not going to be good. But certainly having warmth and having heat applied to those will make them more interesting. So there's always that fine line between cooking that primary food ingredient and then what you're doing for seasoning. One of the great things about grilling is that I think that the smoky and the complexity that you get from the smokiness really helps support lots of other flavors. So Barton's been great talking about acidity and brightness and these other things. And those are the things that I think naturally, by way of the grilling process, you're going to have a leg up in terms of flavor. So oftentimes when I'm grilling things in live fire, I kind of step back from some of those other seasonings and just let the vegetable and the smoke and a small amount of salt just kind of do most of the work. And that's a pretty beautiful thing in most cases. Next question here. It's a question about endive, which is a chicory, a type of chicory. This is a question from Hilda. It says, "Hello, Barton. I just wanted want a hint on how to treat endive chicory so it's not so bitter. So far, it's not a favorite, but hopefully it could be. There's a lot of different things that kind of fall into this category. I'm just making a guess. This is kind of the Belgian variety that looks like a small football or a torpedo-shaped lettuce almost. It's very light in color, almost a white to pale yellow or very, very light green. And it does have a beautiful texture, a crispness, a lightness, a freshness, but there's bitterness. Everything really in that family, that chicory family, has a bitter component, whether it's curly frisee, whether it's the endive, whether it's escarole. All these in the same family have similar flavor characteristics. The bitterness is a unique flavor, and I get it that it's not the flavor that a lot of people are drawn to as a primary flavor. You don't think, oh, that was so bitter, I loved it. Whereas you might think about that as something that was acidic or sweet or balanced in those ways. But I would say finding ways to embrace that bitterness as a means of balance within the dish, knowing that you might have a smaller portion of that just to kind of refresh your palate. It's not something you maybe want to eat a lot of, right? So a small amount satisfies you. But then finding ways, if you put it on the grill, developing some sweetness from that. I've even done braised versions with that vegetable, and I've done other versions that just find those ways from a technique point of view to add some sweetness. I would say also the treatment that you give it, whether it's a combination of acid and sweet, is going to play a big role. So a white balsamic vinegar that has some residual sweetness, the use of toasted nuts and seeds to add some complexity and some sweet/nutty components. And then just, thinking about balance. Balance can be so important in these things. If it takes a little bit of extra sweetener or some reduced, juice or stock or some other thing to kind of build flavor, that's perfectly acceptable. The other thing I find works really well is the application of fresh herbs. So the brightness, the kind of vegetal nature of, adding those ingredients to the bitterness, actually, I think enhances the freshness. It makes the bitterness not just appear one note on your palate. It makes it feel like you're having a broader spectrum or an arc of flavor that is on the bitter spectrum, but has complexity within it. People don't want one note bitterness. They don't want to eat that piece of char, right? But if it is part of a larger story that their mouth is telling them, that's going to be a lot more interesting. I'm going to pause there and ask Patrick to go back to our last segment of video before we wrap up with just a few final questions.
All right, folks, we're back. Couple of changes. I put an undershirt on because it's really hot out here in the noonday sun. Also, you'll notice that the food has disappeared. Part of that is because we had to bribe Lori next door with some food to ask her to give us a 10-minute reprieve on mowing. So, hey, Lori, thank you. You're a wonderful neighbor, and we love you. Also, my pregnant wife just came down and stole the rest of it, which is awesome. So she's up there eating it now. So the last couple of dishes we have for you, I'm just going to run through these very quickly. So a roasted eggplant dip. Now this is easy to make ahead. You can make this in your home oven as well. And I believe the recipe that we featured we shared with you is for that. But once you have cooked the eggplant, I figured it out. All you do is peel off the skin, and I kind of just rotate it off, really. Use gravity and it just pulls right away from that skin. And you see you still have big chunks. It's hot and cooked throughout. Maybe it doesn't just so easily come off, but anyway. So this is similar to like a baba ganoush, but I don't put the lemon juice in there or the tahini. And it just makes it a little bit cleaner, the flavor a little bit lighter. Put that down there. And, well, it's an absolutely brilliant dip that this has so much flavor. It has all that smokiness, that slight bitterness from the eggplant and the brightness of olive oil. And that's gonna add some salt to this, and that's it. Because the eggplant has so much acidity to it, that sort of biting, bitter, back of the palate acidity, you really don't need to add any acid to this. Though if you did want to, a little bit of the sherry vinegar would be lovely. Now, a Vita Prep, I've got a little Ninja here. Okay. And that is all it takes. And what you end up with is a puree that is, all the seeds are in there, but it's perfectly smooth other than the seeds. And it's just this wonderful, rich, that olive oil fully emulsifies into it. It just gives it a really wonderful, succulent texture to it. And yeah. So, the last thing I wanted to talk about is alternative burgers. So instead of just beef on the grill, well, there's a whole lot of them out there, right? I make my own veggie burger with brown rice, beets, black beans, what else is in there? Prunes that I rehydrate a little bit, and just all of it comes together, and it's this beautiful, well, it's really flavorful, delicious, wonderful. And you know what? One of the things that I don't like about alternative proteins, like tofu or veggie burgers, is when they try to pretend like they're a burger. You know what? Let tofu be tofu. Let a tuna burger, as I've got here, be a tuna burger. Let a veggie burger be a veggie burger. You know, dress them up, make them sexy. Tell people what it is. So what I've got here is a tuna burger. These are from my friends at Norpac Fisheries out in Hawaii. This is made from ahi tuna, highly sustainable. And thank you to my friend Tom Kraft over at Norpac for sending me a bunch of these. I've really been enjoying using them. So this is made with ahi tuna and quinoa. And it sounds a little bit weird, right? But it's so truly fabulously delicious. But what I think is really key to the alternative burgers, whatever they are, made out of, is, well, the general foundation of a hamburger. You want to have a bun that is slightly crisp. You want it to have some texture to it so it'll absorb any juices that touch it. That way, you're not only maintaining the structural integrity of the burger throughout the process of eating it, but you're also integrating the flavors of the dish, and, well, it's a good thing. So I'm going to add, and this is what I love about alternative burgers, is that they really give you the sort of the freedom and the leeway to really dress them up. And well, I've got this eggplant puree, so I'm going to put some of that on the bottom. And then what else do we have? These toasted buns, and then we got some tomatoes. Wow, the knife is so hot from the sun that it's making the tomato steam as I slice it. So, getting back to that idea of structural integrity, and speaking of, where's the spatula that I had out here? Oh well, I'll use this one. Structural integrity, you want to be mindful of how you stack a burger, because if you just have tomatoes running throughout it, tomatoes are what? They're basically the vegetable equivalent of a slip and slide. Everything's gonna just shoot right out from it, right? So be mindful of how you build things. Moist ingredients, put them on the bun. Don't put them between layers because you're gonna shoot them out again. All right, I'm gonna use my heat-proof spatula here. So these cook very quickly, and I'm not gonna try and give them a deep, rich sear or char the way you really want to with a burger. Now, honestly, I could have done a better job with them than that, but just a little bit of color on them. This is on a dying fire, but well, we're doing a lot of demos here. You get the point. They're gonna cook through, they're gonna have this really wonderful texture that the quinoa is gonna absorb any of the juices that come out of the tuna it's mixed with. They're seasoned wonderfully, and they're so thin, they cook in just a few minutes. So, I've got some lettuce that I just grabbed out of the garden right before we started and is now wilted. So I'm going to put that down because that's going to provide some friction. Hold that burger there. Then I will put a tomato down. Then I'll put the burger on top of that, some cucumber, and then pickled ginger over the top. So yeah, structural integrity is really key. One of the very favorite burgers that I've ever had, though, it's called the Hickory Burger. And it's a beef burger, and it's from Houston's Restaurants, which I used to work at years ago. But it's a burger, and what they did, though, is they have a butter toasted bun, like a brioche bun like this. But what made it so special is that underneath the burger patty is very thinly shaved shredded raw cabbage. Then you have burger, then you have some ham, and then some barbecue sauce, and then over the top of it is this mound of cold shredded cheddar cheese. Now, I know that I'm just going to battle with Bobby Flay right now, who really likes his cheese melted, but try this sometime. Try putting cold shredded cheese on top. When you have this crunchy bun and you bite down through it, and then you hit that sort of tannic textured cheese that's cool and just kind of slows your mouth down, and then you hit the hot juicy burger with the sweetness of the barbecue, and then finish that off with the crunch of the cabbage at the bottom. It is the most satisfying structure to eat that I've ever had, and that's what got me really thinking about the structure of a burger. So what I'm really demoing for you here is, well, hey, this is just a really good, great sustainable product that I really like and I'm happy to showcase. But that idea of layering textures, cucumbers, just thin sliced raw cucumbers, now bulk them up like that. Don't just lay things flat, right? Give them some texture. And then a bunch of pickled ginger over the top. And there you have it. So again, sort of back to that burger, when you bite through this, you hit the crunch of the ginger and the cucumber. You hit the savoriness of the burger itself, and then you kind of flush with the moisture of the tomato. The lettuce is holding it all in there, providing a little bit of bitterness, and then that eggplant puree or mayonnaise or anything down there, aioli that you would, kind of rounds it all out. So that takes what is really, a small patty, not the typical American big half-pound burger, right? But this is more satisfying than almost any burger I've ever had because of that structure. So that's key. And with that, I think we're done here. I'm going to head back inside, take some questions. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
All right. So I am, of course, not Barton, not inside his home. Really pleased to have the opportunity to support Barton and his family during this time today when they are expecting their new family member into this world. So we're going to wrap up this amazing half and half live event with some final questions. And as I indicated earlier, there will be an opportunity for Barton to answer these additional questions that I don't get to. And of course, in future live events. So we're not going to throw these questions away. They're going to be used and Barton will have a chance to address them. But I'm going to go ahead just now and answer just a few more questions to get back into this. One of the questions that we have here is about doing corn on the cob on the grill. Brent asks, is it better to wrap it in foil or in the husks? And Brent, I have a very specific technique that I like to use for corn on the cob. I've seen a lot of different techniques. Some people just shuck it directly, completely, get all the all the exterior off and all the fibers, all the silk off. And they just grill directly. You get direct contact with the corn on the grill. You get beautiful coloration. In that technique, I have found a tendency at times for the corn to dry out a little bit too much. So my technique is kind of a modified technique where I actually will shuck the corn, but leave the husk intact on the bottom, but take all the silk, all those fine threads out. So we're not dealing with it while it's cooking or after it's been cooked. So I'll shuck, I'll remove the silk, but leave some of those green leaves attached. And then when I'm putting the corn on the grill, by the very nature of how I've shucked it, I'm going to have some corn that's directly touching the grill grates and has direct heat contact. I'm going to have other pieces of the corn that are more obscured or hidden by the leaves themselves. And that's going to create some variation in the cooking environment, going to create some opportunity for steam to be trapped and for the heat from the steam then to help with cooking through and also maintaining moisture. So I don't find that cooking in foil is particularly interesting. I think if you have a natural wrapper like the husk, those beautiful exterior leaves of the corn, that's going to be the best way to go. When my corn is done, I go from the hot side of the grill to the cooler side of the grill, and that way you can kind of stack them up. You can put them into a little corn pyramid, and that just gives the corn a chance to cook through while everything else is kind of doing it. There's not going to be a lot of harm in it sitting in that area. Another thing I'll say around the corn is that what's beautiful, and Barton did an amazing job explaining that a lot of these things you can do on the grill, but then put it in your fridge, eat it tomorrow. I do a lot with grilled corn in salads. I love grilled corn with red onion and cilantro and sherry vinaigrette. Just an amazing dish. It's like the taste of the summer for me. So I'll oftentimes grill twice as much corn as I think I need, and I'll use it in lots of different areas. I'll put it onto green salads. I'll make a corn-based salad. It makes beautiful filling in tacos and lots of different things. So whenever I have it grilled and cut off the cob, it's like, wow, that was just amazing. So hopefully that helps you with your corn question there, Brent. Another question that we had here is, can you use a propane grill for these recipes? Absolutely, Becky. We've taken time here in this live event to talk about live fire, and Barton talked about all the benefits of live fire. But if a propane grill is what you have and more comfortable, then you'll still get a lot of great benefit from the flame of that, with the charring and the heat and the direct heat and those sorts of things. So absolutely, use that propane grill. It's going to still be a lot more flavorful than just doing something stovetop, let's say. Wanda wants to know how to roast garlic. I would say that the easiest thing in terms of garlic would be to roast it whole, very much like Chef Barton showed in the embers, demonstrating the onions and the eggplant and the pepper. So whole head in the skin. I would say with garlic, you can be less aggressive with the heat. You want that garlic to get very soft and more of that golden color versus a really, really brown color. Of course, the exterior will be very charred, but if you could cook that garlic a little bit more softly, a little bit less aggressively than, say, the onion, that would be beneficial as well. Doesn't need any oil on the outside, just basically, as Barton showed, just like the onion, you can put that directly in the embers. Make sure you move it around, and you'll know it's done when it becomes very, very soft and fragrant. And at that point, you can let it cool and take the exterior off. The individual cloves of garlic at that point should be really nicely cooked and should fairly easily pop out of the skins, those individual garlic clove skins. So hopefully that's going to be helpful for you. It's a delicious, delicious way to prepare garlic. It's another one of those things that when my fire is winding down, I'll just put 2 or 3 heads of garlic, walk away for 20 or 30 minutes, come back. I'm like, wow, now I have roasted garlic that I can use in various recipes throughout the rest of the week. Next question here that we have is, thanks again for your answer, Ken. Charring or burning, as some call it, meat is different than vegetables. How do we char vegetables while at the same time preventing them from tasting burned? Yeah, this is a fine line, right? We're here talking about live fire and the benefits of having that direct contact and having small bits of char in your food, but not too much, and these sorts of things. So some of this will come down to personal preference. And I'll say some of it also comes down to just building an awareness of the way that char affects different ingredients. So char on broccoli or cabbage, let's say, is going to be a lot different than the char on a piece of onion. And the extent to which those things are really charred on just the exterior versus more, kind of getting into the flesh or to the actual core of that ingredient. So I would say, again, it's a bit of a balancing act. I love to have direct heat, direct fire touching vegetables. When those flames are directly touching and you're getting that black and speckled, that's great. I certainly wouldn't recommend eating the exterior char on the eggplant or the onion or those sorts of things, but those black speckles, those little tiny parts that you go, wow, there's smoky, there's bitter, there's these other flavors. That's going to make food really, really interesting. So again, everyone's preference is a little bit different in terms of how far you go. But I would just kind of take that as a baseline. It's good to have those speckles. It's good to have the amount of browning or even charring as you're comfortable with. If it goes a little over, you can always just cut off that particular part or scrape it off. No harm, no foul. It happens when you're working with a live fire. The other thing here I'll mention just about kind of overview in terms of some of these veggies is, while we've had conversation about oil or no oil and these sorts of things, one thing that you shouldn't also shy away from or feel bad about is if you're grilling your veggies and you have some onions charring on the grill, if you want to pull those off and let them just cool down on the side or brush them with some marinade or a flavorful stock to kind of cool them down and let them absorb and give them a little bit of a different character, that's also perfectly fine. Don't think just because you're barreling down the road and you've got your food on the hot grill that it has to stay there and do whatever it does. Like, you can always move it, you can pull it off, you can infuse it with flavor, you can moisten it up so it slows down the cooking process and all these other things. So remember, you're in control, not the fire. You pull it off the fire if it's getting too charred or too smoky for your liking. That does it for all the questions today. I know we still have some here on the board, but I want to pass those on to Chef Barton so he has an opportunity to answer some questions. Again, really great, really honored to be here in place of Barton today as he and his wife, Carrie, welcome their new family member to the world. And we're really happy we were able to pre-record some of this in the anticipation that such a thing might happen. So thank you again for joining. It's always a pleasure to have all of you engaging with our courses, and in particular, showing so much admiration for Barton as we do. And we look forward to seeing you in class next time. Happy cooking. Take care.